very much, Mr Hosey. How wonderful it is to see you in the chair. And I'd like to start by congratulating the Right Honourable Gentleman, the Member for Forest of Dean, on securing this debate. I very much welcome the opportunity to speak about the positive contribution migration makes to the economy, particularly in Scotland. As you might expect from an SNP MP, Mr Hosey, I want to focus my remarks today on this government's obsession with an unrealistic and counterproductive one-size-fits-all net migration target, which I believe is deeply flawed in economic terms. But in discussing an issue like this, it is important to set the scene and provide a bit of context. Scotland's estimated population was 5.4 million in mid-2016, the highest ever on record, and an increase of 6.7% since 2001. Net migration has contributed to a population increase every year for the last 16 years. In contrast, the rate of natural change has remained low for the past 50 years, and over the past 2 years has been negative. This contrasts with the situation in the UK, where natural change contributes significantly more to population increase. Migration, therefore, has been critical to growing Scotland's population, and any reduction in migration has the potential to seriously damage Scotland's demographic resilience. Looking ahead, Scotland's population is projected to increase by 5% by 2041, driven solely by migration. Scotland has a markedly different demographic profile from the rest of the UK, and that is why I believe immigration policy should be devolved to the Scottish Parliament, a topic I will return to later. Mr Hosey, if current trends continue, net inward migration is projected to be the sole contributor to Scotland's population growth. And I want to speak briefly about EU migrants because they make an enormous contribution to the economy in Scotland. And I am especially fearful about the consequences of restricting free movement in a post-Brexit Britain. Recently, I was out in Glasgow enjoying a dinner, and I was struck from the very moment I entered the hotel to the moment I left, that every single member of staff I came across was a European national. I think that echoes the point that was made by the Honourable Gentleman opposite only a few moments ago. But the reality is that our tourism sector is heavily and increasingly dependent on workers from other EU countries. In 2016, according to the annual population survey, there were approximately 17,000 EU citizens working in tourism in Scotland, representing 9.4% of all those working in the sector overall, with this share rising to 15.3% in the accommodation sector specifically. This compares to an EU citizens' employment share of 5% in the Scottish economy as a whole. Mr Hosey, we know that the UK Government's position on EU citizens in the Brexit process is already having a detrimental impact on the flows of inward migration. The number of nurses, for example, from the European Union registering to work in the UK has fallen by 96% since the Brexit vote last year. Figures collated by the Nursing and Midwifery Council show that the number of new applicants from the EU fell from 1,304 in July last year to just 46 in April. And I think if that doesn't give concern for us, then I don't know what will. And I think it's deeply worrying. I'm more than happy to give way to the Honourable Member.
Trying not to, Mr Hosey, because I did speak for a fair bit of time. On the NHS, just to be clear, there are more EU nationals working in the NHS this year than there were last year. There are 61,891 EU nationals working in the NHS compared to, in June 2017, compared to 58,698 in June 2016. So this idea somehow post the referendum decision that somehow all these EU nationals working in the NHS have gone away is simply not true.
Figures which will presumably include doctors. The figures that I'm quoting are from the Nursing and Midwifery Council, so if he wants to conflate those figures, that's absolutely fine, but I'm quoting directly from the Nursing and Midwifery Council. But I also want to speak about the impact restrictions on migration will have in Scotland's soft fruit sector, which is a vital part of our rural economy and will be of interest to you, Mr Hosey, and I know that the Honourable Lady, the Member for Angus, is here, and I presume she'll be speaking on that as well. But in Labour, it is vital that our sectors retain the ability to recruit staff from across the EU. We know that 15,000 non-UK seasonal workers are employed in our soft fruit and vegetable sector, and I think that should be a cause for concern as we approach this. But before summing up, I want to focus on calls not from the SNP, but from Civic Scotland for immigration powers to be devolved, because we know that a one-size-fits-all approach to which this government, I'm afraid, is currently wedded, will not work for the future sustainability of our economy. I'm more than happy to give way to the Honourable Lady.
Honourable Member for giving way. There have been a number of suggestions about having a separate immigration policy for Scotland and England, but there is, of course, no border there. And there are countries like Australia, for example, which have separate states with separate immigration policies, and he will agree that that does have issue where there are leaks of migrants across the states.
Thank you very much. Given the mess that the United Kingdom government is currently in regarding the situation in Ireland, I'm not sure that a member from the government party lecturing us on borders is necessarily the right kind of frame of mind at the moment. But I do want to touch on this point because the calls for immigration to be devolved don't necessarily come from the SNP, although we support that, but they come from Civic Scotland. I want to quote Graham Smith, who's the head of the Scottish Trade Union Congress, who I believe was right to say, "We believe migration has an entirely positive contribution to make the Scotland's economy, demography and culture, particularly in a properly regulated labour market in which workers' rights are protected." Indeed, he went on to say, "UK immigration policy is increasingly encroaching on devolved powers of the Scottish Parliament, including how it runs its public services and those who work within it." Mr Hosey, he is right. Immigration powers must be devolved to the Scottish Parliament because we in the SNP believe migration is about more than economics. It's about individuals and their families choosing the right to build their lives in Scotland. It's about the contribution they make to our culture, our communities and society as neighbours, friends and family, members as well as work colleagues. It's a contribution that would be lost if people from the EU are no longer able to come here.